Thank you. I have to tell you, I travel all the time, and I think when Ken asked me to do this, it was about 6 months ago. I didn't remember, and didn't really remember what we were doing. I just remembered it was important, and it was the National Science Foundation, and as my favorite agency, I'll always do things with the National Science Foundation. And then when I walked in this room, and I saw a whole bunch of people I know that are here, I thought, geez, I think I must have given these people's names to somebody. I don't know how they'd all be here. So thank you for a lot of my friends and colleagues from across the country who are involved with technology and engineering entrepreneurship for joining WashU and National Science Foundation in this meeting today. So what I'd like to do is speak real briefly about innovation and entrepreneurship and some of why it's important and some of the data relative to women and minorities in this space. So the reason that the topic of entrepreneurship is important is that literally every minute in this country we start a new company. And of those new companies that start, there is a very, very, very small percentage that fit in what we would call high growth entrepreneur companies. Those companies come from science, technology, innovations, and it is those companies that create all net new jobs. Companies less than 5 years old create all net new jobs. So obviously, no startups, no new jobs. Therefore, really important to all of us. So you're all here sitting in the halls of a great university funded by National Science Foundation, NIH, and other agencies. And obviously the discussion that we always have at this early stage of innovation that's coming out of a university is, first of all, what in the world is translational research or proof of concept funding or any of these things, and where do I even start in the discussion? And obviously, where we start in the discussion is the ecosystem. It all starts in the ecosystem, which is, I think, what Ken must have said to me, which is why a bunch of you are here that are representing ecosystems from across the country. My friends from Oregon are here, Amy's here from Chicago, and all of these people are representative within their communities of essentially bridging this gap between university science and the commercial marketplace. And interestingly enough, those two are both, I think, from San Francisco, or were entrepreneurs in San Francisco before they ended up in the startup communities that they're in now in Corvallis and Chicago. And I think they probably have found those ecosystems not to be as rich as the one that they came from. And what I mean by that is, as you look at the right-hand side of this slide, the four actors in the ecosystem are government, university, big company, and startup company. And essentially those four actors have to work together collaboratively, and the porosity of the boundaries between those four actors is what makes it work. It either makes a rich ecosystem or it doesn't. You either have porous boundaries or you don't. And by porous boundaries, I mean students or scientists, innovators at the university are working collaboratively with entrepreneurs or big companies, either in their backyard or elsewhere within their ecosystem. And it is that churn that actually allows the ecosystem to flourish, and that we need to focus on. Now, what's important is that we think about how do we eliminate the policy barriers? How do we get science out of the university and into the marketplace? Some of the things that we want to do is enable research into the market by education. So these are just examples of different commercialization, you might call them, educational programs that have been put in place. Engineering research centers and the IUCRCs are programs of the National Science Foundation that are phenomenal, that you could probably tie an extensive amount of university research that has gotten into the marketplace has been tied to either those engineering research centers or industry university centers. And the other thing that we have to do to build these ecosystems is we have to increase awareness. Increase awareness is the importance of science getting to the marketplace. Now, and here's where I think the interesting data needs to come out. Many years ago, most of the entrepreneurs in the United States were 40-year-old white men. That's no longer the case. Today, a longitudinal study that we did and published a couple of years ago showed that 25% of high-tech, high-science, high-growth companies, one of the founders is a first-generation immigrant. As of 4 years ago, the freshman class at MIT was 50% women and 50% men. As of 3 years ago, there were more women getting PhDs in all areas of life science than there is men, and that number is skyrocketing. And so when I say increase awareness, I'll give you an example. 3 years ago, we were invited to come to Rockville to a postdoc meeting, and they wanted us to talk about entrepreneurship. So I sent one of my colleagues, who is now an entrepreneur and left me. But those of you that know him know he's a little bit of a Pied Piper. Anyway, and he went to this conference that was attended by, I think it was like 7,000 people. And they'd never had anybody there talk about entrepreneurship. And so he came in and talked about entrepreneurship. And I think there was even somebody from the National Science Foundation, I think it was Errol, that was there. And he sent me an email after the talk, and he said, you need to know that there's about 70 people standing in line to talk to Bo when he finished his talk. And the why is because, as many of you know that are in this room that know postdocs, and this year, or last year, we had 50,000, I think it was 49.8 or something, postdocs in the United States, largest number that we've ever had. Those people have spent time with their head down doing their research for a number of years. Nobody has ever talked to them about the opportunity of entrepreneurship. That, obviously, as those of you know, if you're not a tenured faculty member and you are employed by a university, the likelihood anybody's going to talk to you about entrepreneurship is slim to none. And so awareness is unbelievably important. And a couple of things I think that have been happening over the last 5 years, and St. Louis is engaged in one of these programs. One of them is Startup Weekends. We've been hosting Startup Weekends originally all over the United States. Last year it was all over the world. We had 150 Startup Weekends at different places all over the world last year. This year we plan on hosting 450 of them. A Startup Weekend is literally, the founder of Startup Weekend is a 26-year-old entrepreneur who was on the front of Entrepreneurs Magazine, and the caption underneath his name was "Starting Companies in 54 Hours." And that's literally what they do. But more importantly, for this discussion, it's about awareness. It's about bringing people who think they might be interested, who think they might have an idea, but really have no idea. We don't want to force them to go out and get a degree in something to figure out if they want to play in this field. And so participating in a Startup Weekend is a great way to do it. The other program that we've spent the last 5 years replicating, and I see Pete Peters in the back of the room. Pete, wave your hand. And Pete has replicated this program in St. Louis. This was originally the MIT Venture Mentor program. And Pete and Bill Peck, I think, went with me to MIT about 3 years ago, and where I hosted a workshop around mentoring, which is a program that's been in place there, I think, for about 8 or 9 years now. They have 200 mentors mentoring over 100 companies at a time. And the point, again, in both of these cases is one of them gives people the opportunity to participate in something, and the other one, relative to a mentoring program, is it gives those people who think they might want to be entrepreneurs the opportunity to engage and talk to individuals who are experienced in industry, some of them big companies, some of them entrepreneurs, who can give them feedback and help them understand if this is something that they want to pursue. So really, really, really important in this ecosystem to increase awareness about the opportunity of entrepreneurship. So then the next thing that always comes out is, so if we have this imperative about moving stuff to the market, who's going to fund all this? And I thought this was a hysterical a cartoon. I don't know if the people in the back can see it. Do you swear to calm the jittery financial markets and nothing but the jittery financial markets, so help you God? So obviously, in this cartoon, I think I pulled this out about 2 years ago, so imagine how horrible it is now. Do I really want to be an entrepreneur? Is there any way I could really actually raise money? And the answer is yes. There is, literally, show me a good entrepreneurial team with a great idea, and we can find them funding. They will always, I was somewhere last week and somebody was telling me about a survey they've done of entrepreneurs. What was the #1 thing that they need? And of course, there's no way that it's like asking a university academic, what is the #1 thing that you need? What is the answer in both cases? Money. I need funding for my lab, or I need funding for my venture. So that's always the answer. That's always the answer, that everybody's going to come forward. And frankly, getting funding for your lab and getting funding for your entrepreneurial venture are the exact same problem/opportunity, and that's articulating the problem and finding the best people to collaborate with. And so that's not going to change. It doesn't matter that the markets are horrible. There's still tons of angel money out there. There's still plenty of venture money out there. And there's still plenty of collaborators, even if that's big companies with their venture funds. So don't let the money part stand in your way. And so ultimately, I think the story of innovation and entrepreneurship that needs to be told as it relates to diversity is really simple. And again, if we look at the people that are going through our universities, they're of every size, shape, and color. Unfortunately, women, and I'm going to use women because I have the data that goes along with women. 5 years ago, we stopped funding women's entrepreneurship activities at the Kauffman Foundation, and we stopped funding it because we'd been doing all of this forever, and the data were absolutely, nothing was happening. And so I funded Toby Stewart at Harvard, who essentially does network theory type of research, and asked him to, and a couple of other academics, we funded 3 separate studies to look at trying to identify what is the problem. So why, if we have, even just use the life science data point, why if we have more women in life science than men that have the capability of moving and are doing great science, why are they not moving it to the market? And what we found, and I'll give you a really specific example. One of the studies that David Aldrich did, we looked at the top 1,500 National Cancer Institute funded PIs. And the reason I chose NCI is I knew there was a lot of women in that data set. And of the top 1,500, there was a lot of women. As well as men. And what we found was that the women were funded at the same level in terms of research into their labs. They were publishing at the same level, in the same highly cited journals, et cetera. The women literally, almost to the person in the data set, were not commercializing, but for Mary Claire King, were not commercializing their science at all. And the difference between those 2 cohorts, when we went out and started to meet with these individuals, almost all of the men in the data set had networks in the commercial marketplace. They'd either consulted with industry sometime in their career, many of them sat on startup companies, scientific advisory boards, many of them sat on advisory boards or boards of directors of big companies. The women, 0. We funded a study at MIT, of all MIT faculty, that Fiona Murray conducted about 5 years ago, looked at all MIT faculty, science and engineers, in the science and engineering programs, both men and women, and granted the women in the study was very small. All of the men either sat on a scientific advisory board of a startup or were on a board of directors of a big company. 100% of the women were all on boards. NASA, NIH, National Science Foundation, or every not-for-profit you could ever imagine. Zero were on for-profit boards. Alice Gast had just become, at the time, the VP of Research, and I just happened to be, I don't remember, sitting next to her at a dinner, and I was telling her about this data, and she said, well, that's funny, because I just became the VP of Research, and somebody just asked me to be on their board of their company. And she said, and I wondered, my science has never changed. Why? I wonder why suddenly I'm asked. So at the end of the day, it's all about networks. Networks, networks, networks. The reason that we wanted to replicate the MIT Venture Mentoring Program is networks. It's the networks that we can surround. That's the reason that the ecosystem is so important. It's the networks. Unfortunately, many of the people within our ecosystem, whether they are women or underrepresented minorities, don't have the same networks that their counterparts have. Don't avail themselves to the opportunity to get some kinds of roles in the for-profit marketplace. And just to give you one more example, many years ago, before we even started doing this, we funded since then a database out at UCLA that's called the Rockstar Scientist Database. And the reason that we did that is I literally did a survey of the top funded, or of the top patented PIs that are in the United States. I personally picked up the phone and called 50 of them. This was 8 years ago. And simply asked them to tell their story. And in every single case except for one, I heard the exact same thing. And I'll quote Dennis Leota, because Dennis is a serial entrepreneur, life science faculty at Emory University. And as Dennis said to me, I was at Emory University before Emory was cool. And he said nobody knew what Emory was when I got here. And he said, and I was a half-baked biochemist, PhD, who just happened to be totally poor when I was doing my postdoc, and my advisor got me a consulting gig for Merck Sharp and Dome at the time. And he said, I spent the summer working at a lab at Merck, I think in Rahway, New Jersey, and he said, it was amazing to me, but for that experience, I would never understand the impact of the science I was working on in the lab on the commercial marketplace. 84% of the HIV products that are on the market came from Dennis Leota's lab. So it's a story of networks and the importance of networks and the importance for all of us that are, want to support. I don't want everybody to be an entrepreneur, but if you've got great science in your lab, I want you to, find other people. I have, am I on video? No, I can't tell the story. If you want to hear a really good story about Mary Claire King, ask me later. But I mean, I've literally had scientists tell me that the trauma of moving their science to the market was so horrible that they would easily give it to anyone else to move to the market. But it was because they didn't have a network of individuals they can call. I mean, one of the reasons that we think the ecosystem in Silicon Valley, and the young woman I'm sitting next to is from Palo Alto, is so good is, if I'm a PI at Stanford, the likelihood that I'm living next door to an entrepreneur is pretty high. And therefore, I've got somebody to bounce my ideas off of. So, one of the things that we try to do at the Kauffman Foundation, we have both Kauffman.org and entrepreneurship.org, and both of these websites are built for entrepreneurs. Kauffman.org is more policy-focused. Entrepreneurship.org is actually for entrepreneurs. And you'll find videos there. You'll find videos of other scientists that are entrepreneurs and the things that they went through in trying to move their science to market. You'll find lots of educational content. We even have on entrepreneurship.org 2 subdomains, Energy Innovation Network and eMed, which is our new site for entrepreneurs in the medicine space. Because we know that the kinds of information that you need is completely different. But again, I would just stress to you, even the best part, even if you don't want education, the best part of going to those sites is you're going to see videos of people that you could reach out to and contact. if you have some science or innovation in your lab that you're trying to move to the market. So I would encourage you to do that. We also have a program at the Kauffman Foundation that we've started called Kauffman Labs. And again, the reason for Kauffman Labs is essentially the same thing, is that we find so many early stage innovators out there that really struggle to get their science or technology to the market. And our interest in Kauffman Labs, the first year we ran it, we ran a postdoc program. And we selected 15 postdocs from across the country. And it was an unbelievable experience for us, really horrible and really great, all at the same time, kind of like childbirth, I think. And it was a fascinating experience because what we found was that the struggles of a postdoc we really didn't understand relative to some of the struggles they had with the intellectual property in their lab, and some of the struggles that they have with, their faculty advisors that have a job they want them to do that doesn't have anything to do with them taking this invention to the marketplace. But again, part of doing Kauffman Labs was simply, how do we surround these people with a network, provide them some education, give them information only that they need to know when they need to know it, because that's the most useful, and then how do you surround them with a network? So my hope is what we're able to do relative to growing economies is actually harness everybody that's available. We put people through great institutions like WashU or other institutions across the country to give them knowledge. They create that new knowledge, and then we need to get that knowledge into the marketplace. Some of you will be founders, some of you may be scientific founders, and we'll find entrepreneurs to surround you and help you take it to the market. And I would suggest to all of you that are mentors, get women, get underserved minorities onto boards. There was a study that was done about 4 years ago looking at for-profit, I think it was Fortune study, for-profit companies, and I even wrote this down. Women on boards, companies with more women outperform those other companies with least or zero women by 53%. So diversity isn't like just let's do this to be nice. It's let's do this to be productive. How can we actually engage all of the highly educated talent that we have in this country and help them achieve their dreams? And that's what I hope you guys are here trying to figure out today. Thank you.